so I would ask them what the last book they read was. Tell me about the last book. What did you like, right? And if they're looking at the floor or out the window, and they're struggling, they say, well, so or maybe they say, well, I'm pretty busy. I don't really read books. Or what I say, okay, no, that's okay. So tell me, it's okay you don't read books, but tell me about an interesting article that you read recently in, the business press, the popular press, where it was. And if they don't have an answer there, I'm not going to hire them, right? Because they're not reading, they're not curious. Curious people improve the world.
Welcome to We Need to Talk, where we try to figure out how to find fulfillment in life and reduce dissatisfaction. Listen to this full episode if you'd like to hear how mentors are fundamental catalysts for helping you progress in your career. And the question arises, well, how do you find a mentor? So we discuss 2 personality traits or characteristics that can support you in attracting a mentor. And these 2 traits are rarely spoken about, so it's quite valuable to hear about them, but they're ultimately very effective. So make sure you listen, enjoy the episode, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's go.
One of the reasons why I didn't feel like I didn't have to do this, here I am, Hollywood agent kind of approach, was not just that I had sort of a sense of inner confidence, but I also had some really good mentors, right? And I had selected mentors, or the mentors had found me. It was a little bit of both, of people that, in fact, would do some career advancement on my behalf, right? And so, for example, one of my longtime mentors, my long friend Arnold Grossman, who's now 85 years old. I mean, when I started in the airline business in 1984 with a very small company, he had just been hired not long before and we hit it off immediately. And he was an interesting guy because he was one of these guys that really respected education. I think that, frankly, he liked the fact that I was coming into an organization with a PhD. There weren't a lot of PhDs working at airlines, right, or whatever. I don't know what it was, but he took a liking to me, right? And that man today is still, I think of him, I sometimes call him my rabbi. I'm Lutheran. I'm a Protestant. I'm not a Jew. He's Jewish. He's my rabbi. He's a rabbi, means teacher, right? He's my teacher, always has been. And he was astonishingly good throughout my career in helping me advance. And in fact, midway through my career, I had never worked directly for him. And midway through my career, he actually hired me into my first department head position. He was the vice president of international planning at American Airlines, and he hired me to be the head of the international affairs department. And I worked for him for 4 years. And those 4 years, he, very subtly was able to get my name out there as somebody who was doing the work. And I became then, a trusted and known quantity. And it was very interesting, Henry, because at American, they had a very strong, almost over the top program to treat MBAs differently than people that didn't have MBAs. So there was a separate track and career advancement and salary, and he's got an MBA. And of course, I was kind of a odd duck, right? Because I didn't have an MBA, right? But Arnold was able to advance my career and talk to people very candidly. I remember he had a conversation when he wanted to hire me. And I was the finalist for the job, and I was absolutely hands down his pick. And he went in to talk to the CFO, and the CFO looks at my CV and says, he doesn't have an MBA. And Arnold said, he's got something better than that, Gerard. He's got a doctorate. Well, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit, but you're getting the point of somebody. And so what happened at the end of the 4 years? Well, I did a lot of work, and Arnold always gave me the credit, right? So here's a situation where the mentor-mentee relationship is very special, because the mentor is comfortable enough in his own skin. He has that same level of confidence, right, that I had. And he doesn't need to claim the credit for himself, because that's very common, right? You do the work and your boss takes the credit. I did the work, and when he went in to see the CEO, he said, Rob wrote that letter. I did a lot of writing to government officials, right? And I'm a good writer. I will say that with a little bit of in humility. And he would say, Rob wrote that. And so what happened at the end of the 4 years, the CEO called me one day directly. And of course, I had met him a couple of times. He knew who I was, and he knew that Arnold would say Rob wrote that, right? So he called me and said, "Come see me." And he promoted me, and I went to work directly for him, right? Because of that, right? So a little bit more storytelling than you want, but you're getting the idea. I like to tell stories because I think they're illustrative of things. All right, I've been talking way too long.
This is good. This is really good.
The caffeine is like, oh my God.
No. This is good. Nick, before you go on to the next question, I want to ask one thing, Rob. What made Arnold your mentor like you? You must have displayed some sort of traits that he wanted to root for you in some way. Because I'd love to extract that.
Yeah, Henry, exactly. Two things: curiosity and critical thinking skills. Okay. And so those two things, right, to me are among the most valuable things that people can have, right? And in fact, when I was talking in Nick's class at the University of Zurich a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how I hired. Who did I look for when hiring, right? Well, I looked for people that were curious, just in the same way that Arnold was looking for somebody who was curious. How does that work? I'd go in to see him, at the end of the day, and I'd say, Arnold, do you have time? And I was new to the airline business. Arnold, do you have time to explain how this works? And of course he did. He loved it because he was a teacher, right? He was the rabbi. Oh, well, Rob, here's how that works. And and of course, he also liked the fact that I had critical thinking skills. And critical thinking skills are so important, right, to success. So many times in my career, I was up against people that had no ability to look at all sides of a problem, no ability to do a cost benefit analysis where there was things on one side and things on the other.
To all the listeners out there, I can underline Rob's advice with the curiosity and critical thinking. I had a mentor at the company I interned at. Well, I mean, sort of an unofficial mentor. And he said, Henry, we sort of had a very good connection, and he was a relatively high up in the hierarchy. He said, keep your critical thinking and keep your curiosity. Literally those words he said. So when you just said that, I thought, it just came back to me again. So yeah, I think that's
so. And I think, Henry, I think the lesson there, now that we've got two data points, Arnold and your guy, I think the lesson there really is that, and it's not, and it's interesting because it's not often articulated, in an explicit way, but I think those two traits are really, really essential. I mean, on the sort of cognitive side of of career and company and all those kinds of things. I mean, obviously, over on the on the relationship set of skills things, it's good to be a nice person and not an asshole, and those other things. But the critical thinking and the curiosity, absolutely.
That's we could dive into the whole psychology of it, but that would take a long time, I think.
But I don't think we need to, because I just think it's not that hard. But I think that people oftentimes, again, I think they overlook those things. I think those things need to be brought front and center by more than just Arnold Grossman and your guy at the bank or wherever it was, right? I think they do. And I really wish that that those two things would really be made more explicit elements. I mean, maybe I'm dumb, and maybe they're already out there and I'm just not seeing them. But I think that that those two qualities should be more talked about more often and more, explicitly, as I said.
The thing is, I think one could promote the idea more. However, I feel like the curiosity and critical thinking, especially the curiosity, really, it would stem from an authentic motivation. Either you're curious or you're not. I think, and if you'd promote, then okay, curiosity, critical thinking, that will get you far. But then people aren't curious.
Yeah, let me just push back gently on that. I don't think it's binary. Okay, I think it's on a continuum. Okay, And I think that the people all the way over here on the far side of the continuum are totally curious. But and there are people that are down here, but everyone, and so there's a lot of people in between. And what I say is that whether you're at the bottom with zero, first step is you've got to understand you're at the bottom with zero. And oftentimes nobody ever tells people that, right? But whether you're at the bottom or you're in the 25th percentile of curiosity or the 50th percentile or the 75th percentile, every person along that spectrum or that continuum can move towards the 100% percentile, right? How do you do that? You know how you do that? You read. You read. And reading is proxy for curiosity, you know. And Nick will remember this from the talk I gave a couple of weeks ago. You know, when I was hiring people, I couldn't in a job interview, Henry, say, are you curious? What are they going to say? Well, yes, sir, right? Natürlich. So I would ask them what the last book they read was. Tell me about the last book. What did you like, right? You know, and if they're looking at the floor or out the window, and they're struggling, you know, they say, well, so or maybe they say, well, I'm pretty busy. I don't really read books or what. I say, okay, no, that's okay. So tell me, it's okay you don't read books, but tell me about an interesting article that you read recently in, you know, the business press, the popular press, where it was. And if they don't have an answer there, I'm not going to hire them, right? Because they're not reading, they're not curious. Curious people improve the world, right? They ask why.
And the thing is, or maybe I had a misconception here, that curiosity is, there's some things I would have thought one is curious about, and there are other things one is not curious about. Or are you're sort of implying here that curiosity is a sort of an internal aspect that encompasses your whole life?
Well, I think it does. I think it certainly encompasses the way that we think and the way that we perceive the world. Okay, not to get sort of too cosmic, but I think it really does. And you know, and I think I think that, and I'm, you know, really straying from anything that I know anything about, but I suspect that people who would measure very high on this curiosity continuum, I think would be people that really they really have their minds open and switched on all the time, right? They're not, you know, there's a certain aspect of sort of willful consciousness. I think the term nowadays, I think youngsters are using this term mindfulness, and I guess that's probably part of it. You know, that we're really, we're not just kind of dulled down to something, but we're kind of always on to a greater or lesser extent, no matter what we're doing. I mean, I'm taking my dogs for a walk, right? And I'm, you know, looking around at the physical environment, or I'm noticing things, or I'm looking up at the sky and I'm wondering about this or wondering about that, or, you know, I'm, you know, whatever. But I think it really does have something to do with that. But so I think that, you know, if you're curious about curiosity, you should probably spend a little time, you know, reading more about what makes it work, because, you know, I think we've agreed it's really vital.
Yeah, I remember I once Googled it, but I didn't look into it much. But I guess it's something I should get back to again, because it seems to be important. I'll write it down.
I would like to
Awesome.
add one more question on this
Yeah,
whole
go for it.
story, because Rob, you also phrased that this intrinsic sense of self-worth would like protect you in your career. And is that in the sense that if you have that, you would maintain your integrity in situations where a firm or like a situation might require you to like kind of sacrifice personal values for the greater good of the company? So would intrinsic sense of self-worth help for that? And then second question, like, how does one build that?